girls. So today we're going to look at Amy Tan's mother tongue. Um, have you heard of this writer, popular writer Amy Tan? Yeah? Okay. Amy Tan is a Chinese American writer, so she has a hyphenated identity. Okay, and this Chinese American writer is a much celebrated writer for her profound exploration of key themes like identity, family dynamics, and cultural heritage. Okay, and she seems to be focusing in her writings the experiences of immigrants, and that makes her really special and distinct. And she doesn't stop with that, but she goes on to delve into the experiences of the immigrants and their children in America. This particular writer, Amy Tan, was born on February 1952 in Oakland, California, that is to say the west of America. And so she is a first generation American, unlike her parents who are just immigrants. Okay, so sorry, I should be saying she's a second generation American. Her parents are first generation Americans, the immigrants, and so we find that unlike her parents, Amy Tan had her upbringing in America with a deep rooted culture from China. So she has this dual identity. And despite being in America, her parents have instilled in her the Chinese values while educating her in America. So she seems to have internalized or got the Chinese values in her own self. Okay, so Tan's literary journey began with her overcoming of certain personal tragedies, especially the loss of her father to brain tumor, and her brother just within a year, to the same threat. Okay, so these experiences, coupled with her complex relationship with her mother, shaped her emotional depth, and they contributed towards the authenticity of her writing. Now, she became known all over the globe for her particular writing for her debut novel, The Joy Luck Club, which was published in the year 1989. And critics call that a groundbreaking work because that delves into generational and cultural conflicts between Chinese immigrant mothers and their American born daughters. And Amy Tan also has vivid storytelling that's really too gripping. Okay, so we find that Tan's work normally weaves together the themes of cultural dislocation, identity, and the complexities of familial relationships. There are other notable works of hers also, especially the novels The Kitchen God's Wife, The Bone Setter's Daughter, The Value of Amazement, and so on. Now, though her evocative prose and keen insights, or rather through her evocative prose and keen insights into human relationship, Amy Tan has really carved a niche for herself in the contemporary American literary arena. Now, with that, we move on to look at this essay. It's titled Mother Tongue. Does it talk about one's mother tongue in reality, or does it talk about the language that her mother uses? We'll get to know as we jump into this essay. Okay, so this particular essay is an autobiographical essay that delves into the role of language and how any language shapes the identity, culture, and perceptions of people. Okay, and she does that through vivid anecdotes, and while reflecting on her own personal experiences of growing up as a daughter of a Chinese immigrant whose English she describes, that's her mother's English, she describes as limited or broken. Okay, so let's see how she begins. She says, to begin with, in the essay, she says, I'm not a scholar of English or literature. And then she says, I cannot, nor can I give you details of personal opinions on the English language because I'm not a linguist also. And therefore, she says that she cannot give the variations in this country or others. Still, she says, I'm a writer, and that defines her as someone who loves language, and she's fascinated by the language in daily life. And she says, whenever she gets time, she mulls over the power of language and she spends time on it, especially the way language tries to evoke emotions, visual image, a complex idea, or a simple truth. And then, because she's a writer, she says that language is the tool of her trade and she uses them all. And she says she talks about all the Englishes that she grew up with. And suddenly she feels that she has come up with a revelation of the different Englishes that she herself uses. So she says when she was assigned with the task of addressing a large group of people, and she had or not just large group of people, even to other groups of people, or a formal gathering, the way she talked was or what she talked was about her writing, her life, her book, particularly the Joy Luck Club. So when the talk was going on well enough, she remembered a kind of a major difference, and that made her whole talk sound very different, or to her full of flaws. And now she says when she was talking, actually she was talking and her mother was in the other room, and that was probably the first time that her mother had heard her giving a long speech using a kind of English that her mother was not used to. And Tan remembers how she was saying certain things like the intersection of memory upon imagination. So formal. So she seems to be using a kind of a formal English language. And she also started saying that this is there in my fiction, thus it relates to thus and thus. So she tells the readers how she delivered a speech that was grammatically correct, that was grammatically flawless, with grammatical phrases. And she herself says that it sounded kind of a burdened form of it, but then she used all the normalized forms, past perfect tenses, all the tenses, conditional phrases, and all sorts of formal standard English that she had learned from school. And she stresses upon this fact that she did not use the language or the phrases that her mother used or what she learned from home. So just last week, she says, when she was walking down the streets with her mother, she found that she was unconsciously using with her mother not the English, the formal English, the grammatically correct English that she used to deliver the talk, but she was using a kind of a different English, and the English that she normally talks with her mother. Like for example, even me, with one of my own friends, my scholar friends and my student friend, former alumni, I used to talk, hey, come here. I would say, what doing? And then she will say, book reading. Then I would say, oh, book reading. When book reading? How long book reading? So this is the way. See, that makes us close to heart. I know that it's not grammatically correct, but that's how I use. And probably that's the way Amy Tan also started talking with her mother. And look at the phrases that she uses. She says, not waste money that way. Then she says, not just my mother, even when I had to talk to my husband also was okay with that, because for the past 20 years, she has been living with her husband, talking with the same kind of English with him, and he was comfortable with her. It was not a language that was filled with, that had the exact syntax, that was semantically correct, and which was linguistically perfect. But she calls that language that she uses with her, or that English that she uses with her mother and her husband, as a language of intimacy, that was a different sort of English, and she relates that to family talk, rather the language that she grew up with. So she says, "You don't know the idea of family talk that I heard sounds like." Then she says, "Wait, let me quote what my mother recently conversed in, and which she had videotaped probably to understand how it is." And then she says, "I have even transcribed it." So during that conversation, so as I told you, Amy Tan brings in her anecdotes from her own life. Okay, so she says one day when her mother was talking to her about a political gangster in Shanghai, and she says that both the gangster and she, both of them shared the same kind of last name, and she was not happy. And she says that the gangster also adopted the same kind of the family name that her family had used, and therefore it was a kind of a rich comparison. She says the gangster became more powerful, far rich. Amy Tan says became more richer, more powerful, richer and more powerful, and he even became richer than his mother's family. Okay, so it seems that he had come up to their mother's wedding to pay his respects, and then this is what the mother says. This is her English, please note. "Do you song," that's the gangster, "having business like fruit stand, like off the street kind. He's do like Duzong. Duzong is their own family name, but not Sung Mang island people. The local people call Putong the river east side. He belonged to that side local people." You understand? It's not the formal English, it's not the standard English. There's some grammar mistake. Okay, then she proceeds further to say, "That man to ask Duzong father, take him in like become own family. Duzong father wasn't looked down on him." So I think you can read the rest of it and you'll find that this is what she says. And then look at her end of the sentence. "Respect for making big celebration, he shows up. Mean, gives lots of respect. Chinese custom, Chinese social life, that way." So at one point of time, she says that they had dinner at the YMCA dinner, and she were when she that Amy Tan's mother got married, she was 19. Which age? Chinese age 19, because they follow a different calendar, they have a different new year. Now probably this is how it goes on. Okay, you tend to talk in a way that's very comfortable with you. So this lady who Amy Tan, the writer, talks about how her mother is really happy about or is expressive, articulates what she wants to. Okay, and Amy Tan says, "For that matter, do not undermine her, because she has a good reading habit. She reads Forbes reports, she listens to the Wall Street Week conversations, and she converses with her stockbrokers also. She reads standardized books, she understands everything. Yet when she sends videotaped conversation of her mother's language to some of the people, they say they could understand 50%, some say 80 to 90%." Excuse me. And some say that she was speaking pure Chinese. Okay, so I'm reminded of the Tamil movie Dasavadaram, where Kamal Hassan appears in 10 different roles, and in one of the roles where he performs the role of Balram Naidu, and somebody else introduces Balram Naidu, the role played by Kamal Hassan, and he says, while introducing, he says he can speak 5 languages in Telugu. So I'm just fascinated by that, and that's what this mother does. Many people say that she's speaking English, but it looks like she's speaking Chinese. So now here comes what Amy Tan wants to say. She says, "It's my mother tongue, and that's her language. It's vivid, it's direct, it's full of observation and imagery." And she says, "It is this broken language, it is this restricted language that helped her shape her views of the world, and that helped her perceive things around her and make sense of the world." And so after this, you find that, just a minute, there's something. Yeah, here I go. So after this, she perceives that despite being exposed to such kind of English, she was not good enough. Like her scores were not good enough in schools. She says she was good in math and science, but in the areas that and she seemed to have achieved. Just a minute, let me check. Yeah, right here I come. Just so she says. So I begin here. That lately she starts understanding the kind of English that her mother speaks, and she says, like others, like the other people who described it, she says her mother's English was broken or fractured English, and it was damaged also, and it needed to be fixed. She says it was broken, and for example, it was very bad, and everything that she spoke was limited. There was limited vocabulary and all that, and so it also started revealing about the speaker's limited perceptions, people's perceptions of the limited. See, when you don't speak well, when you don't have a command over the alien to the language that you language of the people that you go and settle down in, the people don't look at you well. So those people had perceptions of the limited English speaker, and then slowly she acknowledges that she was growing up with her mother's limited English. Then she said, even I had a limited perception of her. To begin with, she says she was ashamed of her mother's English, and probably particularly because it reflected, her mother's English reflected the quality of her mother's life in America, okay, cultural exposure in America, and therefore it also expressed her thoughts in a very imperfect way. And sometimes she would pop up or she would chip in to support her mother. See, for example, when the mother spoke such broken English, the people in the department stores or the banks or the restaurants did not take her seriously. They did not treat her well. They did not offer her good service because they knew from her language. The moment she opened up to speak, they knew that she was not a resident or a citizen of that nation. And therefore, they to the extent that they even pretended not to understand her, and they sometimes acted as if they did not hear her. Therefore, when the writer was just 15, she would make Amy Tan, Amy Tan's mother would make Amy Tan speak to her on the phone, introducing or disguising herself or as her mother. So sometimes she would call the broker in New York and ask him what happened. She would because they were in California. So and she would introduce herself as Mrs. Stan, and in a very with a typical teenage voice, not the matured voice of a matured woman. And she says based on this, she had to even go to New York, and whenever she was talking over the phone, the mother would stand behind and whisper loudly, "See, why he don't send me check already 2 weeks late? So mad he lied to me." See, I'm saying I'm so mad that he lied to me, losing me money. Okay, so look at the way Amy Tan translates what her mother says into a standardized English. Then she puts it in a perfect English and she says, "Yes, I'm getting rather concerned." So whenever her mother whispers into her ears, she would present that in a perfect English over the phone. "Yes, I'm getting rather confused. You had agreed to send the check 2 weeks ago, but it hasn't arrived." Then she would say, "What do you want? I come to New York. Tell him, front office boss, you cheating me?" And I was trying to calm her down, and Dan says that she just put it in a better way, in a fine-tuned way, in a polished way, and she says, "I can't tolerate any more excuses." And she says, if I don't receive the check immediately, I'm going to have to speak to your manager when I'm in New York next week. So they go there to the New York, and there Amy Tan for the first time was sitting red-faced and quiet with her mother. Who is her mother? The real Mrs. Tan. and this Mrs. Tan was shouting at his boss in a very impeccable and broken English. And likewise, they had been visiting the Wall Street very often, almost that was their routine for 5 days, and it was a less humorous situation, but the mother was not treated very well. At the same time, okay, I'm sorry, at the same time, she had also had to go to the hospital for an appointment because she had a benign brain tumor which was revealed in the scan. So she had not spoken a very good English in the hospital, and still, okay, she said that they did not seem to have any sympathy. But when she asked the doctor for explanation, the doctor was not willing to give her any explanation, but she stood there firm and she said, no, call my doctor. Okay, so when the doctor finally called her doctor, she spoke in perfect English, who Amy Tan spoke in perfect English, and that's when the doctor started responding to her well. Actually, the mother, earlier when she was speaking, I told you the perceptions are formed, and so the doctor did not speak well, nor did he respond well. The mother even complains to her daughter, saying they did not even apologize to me when there was a kind of a confusion there with regard to my scan. But the moment Amy Tan speaks to the doctor in perfect English, the doctor promises that there will be a conference call on Monday, and he apologized to them for all sorts of suffering that the mother had undergone, and he even goes to the extent of regretting their mistake. So that's when she thinks that her mother's life almost had an effect on limiting her possibilities in life as well. She felt that her mother's broken English also seemed to be impacting her in some way or the other. So she goes on to the extent of analyzing it from the point of view of sociologists or linguists, and she says that the person's developing language skills might influence the peers, especially. So here you find that it influences the daughter. And Amy Tan recollects how that's the language spoken in the family, especially in the immigrant families. And she says that is very insular, and that helps in shaping the language of the child. So whatever the mother speaks or however she speaks, that helps it. And then gradually Amy Tan goes on to recollect how, though she was good in speaking English, she was very poor in performance in English, because she always scored only B or B pluses in English, that is to say 60th or 70th percentile on humanities or whatever it is, on the achievement test, but those scores were not good enough. But on the contrary, she seemed to be very good in math and science, where she achieved A's and scored the 90th percentile or higher. So this, she says, okay, math is precise and there's only one correct answer, unlike English where you have multiple of answers. So she goes on to tell us about all the activities or worksheets that they would give, kind of fill in the blanks or complete the sentences, and how, like for example, even though Tom was, Mary thought he was. So the correct answer might be so many other possibilities, but for example, even though Tom was shy, Mary thought he was charming. Okay, so this was with the grammatical structure, even though limit. So there was a kind of a limit, and Amy Tan never succeeded in such tests because she always gave different ones, and that was not the right one that the school or the school authorities had wanted, the teacher wanted. Likewise, she also gives us examples from other worksheet where she would have word analogies, pairs of words and all that, and she would try to find some sort of logical semantic relationship, like sunset is to nightfall as is to, and they would give lots of other analogies, like red is to stoplight, bus is to arrival, chills is to fever, yawn is to boring, and for example, then she could never think of, and then she would see a burst of colors against a darkening sky. So she would have a different kind of an imagination, and all the pairs of words might be confusing, would always be confusing before her, and they would also be logical. So, but then somehow she would not write them in the right correct way, and she would lose her mark. So for all of these things, now as a child she thought that her English was perfect, but as years passed by she started ruminating over her own English, and she felt that her English also had flaws because at school she couldn't perform well. And that is when she starts thinking about her mother's English, and she compares that with her achievement tests in English. And therefore many of the people also started questioning her as a writer, saying, why is it that many Asian Americans who are not represented in Asian literature, and why is it that there are only very few Asian Americans who enroll themselves for creative writing programs? And there are also questions that many Chinese students go out to take up engineering, and so she starts reflecting over them, and she finds that those questions to be broad sociological questions. And so she found in surveys that the Asian students always were better in math achievement tests than in English. And that's when she starts thinking about the English that's spoken in the home. Maybe that has an influence in the shaping of her culture, in the shaping of her identity. She was exposed to a broken or limited English, and therefore her teachers were like always steering them away from writing, and they helped them move towards math and science. However, Amy Tan says that that's not the identity that I wanted to create. I was a rebellious, so she started enjoying the challenge by disproving the assumptions that Chinese students can be excel only in math and science and not in creative writing. So she took up English major in her first year in college, and when she was enrolled as pre-med, and she started writing non-fiction as a freelancer. And afterwards she was told by her former boss that her writing was the worst skill. Still she would sit at home and hone it and all that. In 1985 finally she started writing her fiction, and she had mastery, she believes to have, and she proved that she had mastery over the English language. And so she tells us about the first draft of a story that she later on makes, and that's the Joy Luck Club. And she says, that was my mental quandary in the nascent state. See, she says, I don't know whether I could even pronounce this, but then I wrote all of these things. And later she decided that she will not write only thinking about herself, but she will present or think about, step into the shoes of the readers, and think about what sort of a language they will understand. You know why? Because like her mother, who was a voracious reader, there were other immigrant mothers also who were readers. So such readers came to her mind. So she started writing stories, not with such bombastic words, but with all the Englishes that she grew up with, and she, especially the English that she spoke with her mother, which was too simple, and the English her mother used with her. Okay, so later on people start like it was described as the language that her mother used was described as broken. And and she would say, my translation of her Chinese, because mother used to be speaking wonderful Chinese, and my translation of her Chinese would be described as diluted or watered down. And that's when she realizes that each one possesses their own skills and their own linguistic skills, and they excel in a language that they know better. And however, so if she can speak perfect English, her mother can speak perfect translation. And if she can speak perfect English, she was not so good in Chinese. So there was a kind of an internal language that she wanted to preserve, and it was neither Chinese nor a Chinese structure. So she wanted to celebrate that. Okay, and that's what she does. And just a minute. She had her mastery over Chinese language when she really lacked it, and that's when she thought that there's a difference in the language ability test, language abilities, and that language achievements test cannot reveal that at all. because as a writer she had a great command over language, particularly when she could express her intent, her passion for imagery, the rhythms of her speech, and the nature of her thoughts. So apart from all these things, she also remembers how her critics would always say that talk about her writing and how she succeeded where her mother and she feels that the real success about her novel was not when it was written in perfect English, but when it was read by her mother, and when her mother could read the book, finish it, and she could finally give a judgment saying it's so easy to read. Okay, so that's the greatest blessing that she could ever come up. And so here it's not just that she is presenting before us a fact of a broken language or a broken English, but she seems to be celebrating that broken English. So here let's look at the themes of this particular work. You find that the theme of identity and duality in language is documented here. So on the one hand you have the first immigration, the mother's broken restrained English. On the other hand you have the child's, the second immigration, who was born there, her English, which is perfect English. However, she does not perform well in the schools in her achievement tests. So that's totally different. Then the next theme that's always found in this essay is the exploration of the linguistic prejudice. How people were, we see that when the mother speaks broken English in the department store, or the or at the bank, or with the broker, or at the hospital, people don't respect her. They don't give her the due respect. They pretend not to understand her. They treat her in a very condescending way, and that is the prejudice that they undergo. On the contrary, when the little girl speaks perfect English with the broker, or when she speaks good English at the hospital, the doctor immediately comes forward to apologize and takes corrective measures to treat his patients. Likewise, at the brokerage, when the little girl speaks over the phone, they listen to her well too. Then there is this theme of how the standard English influenced Tan's writing career. So it's not just the standard English that influenced Tan's writing career. There were other Englishes also, because towards the end of the essay, she tells us about how other Englishes also shaped her writing, and that was really, really great. And that is what makes her into a successful writer. And she really feels so proud at the verdict given by her mother at the last, which says it was so easy to read. And the final one is the whole essay. It's a kind of a narrative where you have a personal tone, but has a universal relevance, especially relevance to all the immigrant experiences that people have in the land where they settle down as immigrants. So it's not just a personal experience of Amy Tan. Through her personal experience, she brings out or presents before us a universal relevance. So I suppose you enjoyed this essay of Amy Tan, which is titled Mother Tongue. So by now you know what mother tongue really means, and how that mother tongue shaped her into a writer, gave her an identity of her own, and how she traced her culture, went back to her roots, and brought that on to the novel also. So thank you, girls. Have a good day.